Hi, everyone. This is our second part of the podcast for today, and we want to talk about the 2023 minimum wage and salaries that take into effect in 2023. So I know we talk a lot about exempt employees, and I actually wanted to talk about who these people are. So according to the minimum wages and overtime, it's basically employees who are exempt. The exempt employees are executive, administrative, professional employees, and some computer workers. Could be outside salespeople, such as those who do sales from away from the employer's place of business, like door-to-door salesperson. So basically, on January 1st, 2023, the minimum hourly rate in New York City, Nassau County, Suffolk County, and Westchester County for non-exempt employees is $15 an hour. The minimum hourly rate for non-exempt employees located in other New York State regions, it's went from 13.2 to 14.2 an hour on January 1st, 2023. Um, so it's also going to be sort of raising, and it's going to reach the $15 an hour in those geographic areas as well. But also, we have different categories. So right now, for service employees in New York City, the cash wage went to 12.5 with the 2.5 tip credit. And for the remainder of New York State, it's a little bit lower. It's 11.85 cash wage and 2.35 tip credit. But I think it's also based on my understanding that it all could go up to $15 an hour, just depending on the economic situation. And another specific wage increase, which I know Irene and her firm deals with a lot, is the home care workers, right? So it went up on October 1st, 2022 to $17 per hour in New York City. And Long Island, Westchester, it's 15.2 per hour for employees in other regions in New York State. So again, and again, all the everything that we're reading online, it says that the minimum wage in the other areas is also going to continue to increase. So I think we're going to be looking at minimum wage is close to $17 per hour in mostly all regions. And I know there's a lot of forms that need to be filled out. There's a lot of employers that need to be sort of dealing with employees and all the things that are kind of covering this area. So I really wanted to go to Irene to talk about the forms and anything that she has considerations for us.
Absolutely. Thank you so much, Jane. Um, so what we wanted to talk about, and that leads back from the from what we discussed earlier, is really being able to make sure that all of these forms are documented and they're documented appropriately. And what I mean by that is the proper wage notice form. So New York requires that every employee sign a certain LS form or a variation of an LS form. So as long as all the same information is printed perhaps on your letterhead, you don't have to necessarily give the Department of Labor LS form. You could just go ahead and provide it yourself again, as long as all the information is there. Now, a few things on these LS forms, which are these wage notice forms. Official names are notice and acknowledgement of pay rate and pay date. So just in its title alone, that's what's the most important in these notices, is going to be really letting the employee know what their pay rate and pay date is going to be. But all the other information has to be in there if you do want to have your own form. So we'll start, of course, with the easiest one, which is LS 54 form. That's for your hourly employees. Then you have a few other forms. You can have an LS 57 form. That form would be for your salaried employees that may work varying days or hours. They may have flat rate work or really any other non-hourly pay. Definitely in we see this more often in the hospitality industry, and certainly something that we always ask our clients to talk to us about before they fill these forms out. On the LS 54 hourly, it's a little bit more straightforward. When you have varying hours, varying dates, rates, and so on, it does get a little bit complicated. A good example would be one pay rate if you work a day shift, one pay rate if you work a night shift. Again, gets a little bit more complicated. So we always ask everyone on these LS 57 forms just to follow up and make sure that they're being filled out the right way. Then you'll see that we have an LS 56 option and LS 56 form. Those are for employees that are paid a weekly rate or a salary for a fixed number of hours. So Again, the LS56, not something that we use very often. It requires a lot of tracking, requires you to really make sure that that is the exact number of hours that that employee works, since it's for a specific number of hours. Really strongly recommend here to consult first with an attorney to make sure, again, all the tracking is in place and everything is correct, and that based on what we talked about earlier, that if there's an exemption, that the proper exemption is acknowledged here as well. So that's on that LS56. On the LS59 form, that's the one that's going to tie in perfectly with what we talked about a little bit earlier today. That's the notice for exempt employees. And so it actually here in this form gives you the basis for the exemption. And why is there an FLSA or New York labor law, in either case, a overtime exemption? Also very, very specific here, rules for hospitality employees. Very important that any company that's in the hospitality industry does review with an attorney beforehand and before anything is signed. And then you also have your specific forms as well, such as an LS62 form, which is a specific form for home care employees. You'd have a form for if you're in a type of business that has prevailing wages, all different forms as well. In addition to the different types of forms that I talked about today, I do want to mention one very, very important point here. This ties perfectly into wage increases that Jane was just talking about. And that's about when notice has to be given. These forms, whichever one and whichever category the employee will fit into, must be given at hire, and then they must be given once again before any change in pay rate, in any change in the pay day, any change in any allowances that might be taken. Really any change to pay at all. So even something like you've changed the company-wide that no longer will everybody be getting paid on Fridays, you now changed it to a Wednesday schedule for whatever reason, everybody must re-sign the correct form. If you changed, and even if you gave a salary increase and you're paying someone more money, still they must acknowledge that in one of these forms. If someone has changed from an hourly employee to a salaried exempt employee, they first would have had to sign the LS54 for hourly employees, and then properly sign the LS59 for the exempt employees, listing the specific exemption. It is very, very important that this is correctly filled out, and then it's filled out again before any change in pay rate does take place. So if there's any question on this, if this does come up, and if there's anything that we can help out with, especially with all the changes that we see took place in 2023. And I know we've been talking about this for a few weeks now, and I know that we still have more topics that we want to cover in the coming weeks as well for 2023. It's not surprising that there have been so many changes and updates. 2020, 2021, of course, the state and federal government were focused and concerned on COVID, as well as COVID laws and COVID policies. So it's not surprising that we're seeing 2023 as the first year where basically all these updates have hit all at once. But they do all have to be put in at the same time, because as we talked about at one of our earlier podcasts in the very, very beginning, the DOL is upping its audit force. And this isn't something that we say just to scare everyone. This is less to scare and more to encourage everyone to really, now is the time, get all the documents on order, and just make sure that you really have everything organized together for every single employee, because usually when these changes take place, within a year or two, we usually start to see that the government wants to make sure that you're in compliance and these audits begin. So it wouldn't be surprising if that's what we see in the coming years. But again, any questions that anyone might have on this, we're here and we're happy to help. Please feel free to reach out to Jane or I. Thank you so much, everyone.
Thank you. Bye.